The blood-soaked rope creaked as Commander Yasper Xander watched 7 orcs being dragged into the execution yard, their green hands bound behind their backs, and something inside him twisted when he saw the smallest one stumble over her own chains. The fortress courtyard had gone silent except for the rattle of iron and the labored breathing of the condemned. Yasper stood among the other officers, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. 3 weeks ago, these orcs had been part of a raiding party that attacked a supply caravan heading to the northern settlements. 5 soldiers had died in that ambush. The kingdom's justice was swift and absolute when it came to orc raiders. 7 wooden posts had been erected overnight. 7 nooses swayed in the cold morning wind. The crowd of soldiers and civilians pressed closer, their faces hard with anticipation and old hatred. Yasper had seen executions before. He had ordered them. But something about this morning felt wrong, felt like broken glass grinding in his gut. The orcs were lined up, each forced to stand before their designated post. They were all women, Yasper realized with a jolt. The raiders had been a hunting party, not warriors. His eyes swept across them, taking in their defiant faces, their broad shoulders, their tusks jutting from strong jaws. They wore the leather and furs of the mountain clans, now torn and filthy from their imprisonment. Then he saw her. She was 5th in line, smaller than the others, her green skin mottled with bruises. Her black hair hung in matted tangles around her face, and her amber eyes darted between the nooses and the crowd with barely concealed terror. She could not have been more than 19 or 20 summers. While the other orcs stood with rigid pride, she trembled. Captain Morven was reading the charges in a bored monotone. Yasper barely heard him. His mind was racing through the interrogation reports he had read, the testimony he had heard. The raiding party had killed those soldiers, yes. But the reports also mentioned one orc who had hung back, who had not participated in the killing. One who had tried to stop the others. His heart hammered against his ribs. He had been a soldier for 12 years, had risen through the ranks by following orders without question. He had fought orcs on the border, had lost friends to their axes and arrows. He knew what he was supposed to feel right now. But all he could see was that young orc woman shaking in her chains, and all he could think was that this was wrong. The executioners moved down the line, placing nooses around thick green necks. The crowd murmured with satisfaction. Yasper's commanding officer, General Thorn, stood on the platform with his arms crossed, his expression carved from stone. The executioner reached the 5th post, reached for her. Yasper moved before he could think, before he could stop himself. His boots rang on the cobblestones as he strode forward, his officer's cloak billowing behind him. Soldiers turned in surprise. The executioner paused, rope in hand. "Commander," Morven called out, confused. Yasper planted himself directly in front of the young orc woman, between her and the executioner. His hand went to the hilt of his sword, not drawing it but making his position clear. The courtyard erupted in shocked whispers. "Not her," Yasper said, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. "This one does not hang." General Thorn's face darkened. "Commander Xander, step aside. That is an order." Yasper did not move. He could feel the orc woman's eyes on his back, could hear her sharp intake of breath. "Sir, I have reviewed the interrogation records. This orc did not participate in the killing. She attempted to prevent it. She should not be executed with the others." "She was part of the raiding party," Thorn said coldly. "She shares their guilt. She shares their blood, not their crime," Yasper shot back. His heart was racing now, adrenaline flooding his system. He had never directly defied a superior officer before. "The law requires guilt, General, not association." The general descended from the platform, his boots striking each step like a judge's gavel. He stopped mere feet from Yasper, his eyes boring into the younger man's skull. "You would defend an orc after what they did to Sergeant Markham, to young Corporal Ellis." "I would defend justice, sir." Yasper's voice did not waver, even for an orc, especially for an innocent one. The courtyard had gone deathly quiet. Every eye was on them now. Yasper could feel the weight of those stares, the judgment, the disbelief. He was throwing away his career, possibly his life, for an orc, for a woman he had never spoken to, whose name he did not even know. But when he had seen that noose approaching her neck, something fundamental had broken inside him. He could not explain it, could not justify it with logic or duty. He only knew that he could not let her die. General Thorne studied him for a long, dangerous moment. Then his eyes flicked past Yasper to the orc woman. "What is your name?" he demanded. A pause. Then a voice, rough and uncertain, spoke from behind Yasper. "Kraska, Kraska," the general repeated. "Did you participate in the attack on the caravan?" "I was there." Her accent was thick, guttural. "But I did not fight. I told my clan sisters to stop. They did not listen." "Why should we believe you?" "I do not care if you believe me," she said, and there was something fierce in her voice now, something that pushed past the fear. "Kill me or not, I told the truth." Thorne looked at Yasper again. "You are willing to stake your career on this, Commander, your reputation?" "Yes, sir." "Then she is your responsibility. If she escapes, if she commits any crime, if she so much as steals a chicken, it falls on your head. You will be stripped of rank and imprisoned." "Is that clear?" Yasper's throat was dry, but he nodded. "Clear, sir. Get her out of my sight. Get both of you out of my sight." Thorne turned away, waving a dismissive hand. "Proceed with the others." The executioner looked uncertain, but stepped past Yasper to the sixth orc in line. Yasper moved quickly, cutting the ropes that bound Kraska's wrists with his belt knife. She stumbled, nearly fell, and his hand shot out to steady her. Her skin was warm beneath his palm, her arm corded with lean muscle. Their eyes met for the first time. Hers were golden brown, wide with shock and confusion. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came. "Come on," Yasper said quietly, "before he changes his mind." He guided her away from the line of posts, away from her clan sisters who watched with unreadable expressions. Behind them, Captain Morven resumed reading the charges. Yasper did not look back. He could not bear to. He took Kraska through the fortress corridors, past staring soldiers and servants who whispered and pointed. She walked stiffly beside him, her shoulders hunched, her hands clenching and unclenching at her sides. He brought her to his own quarters, a small suite of rooms he had earned through years of loyal service. It was probably the last day he would call them his own. Inside, he released her arm and stepped back, giving her space. She turned in a slow circle, taking in the sparse furnishings, the weapons on the wall, the maps on the table. Then she looked at him with those amber eyes, and he saw tears tracking through the grime on her cheeks. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you do that?" Yasper sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. His hands were shaking. "I do not know," he admitted. "I truly do not know." They stared at each other across the room, human and orc, soldier and prisoner. Two people whose lives had just been irrevocably tangled together by a single impulsive choice. Outside, the courtyard fell silent, and Yasper knew without looking that 6 bodies now swung from their ropes. The first 3 days were agony of a different kind. Kraska barely spoke, barely ate, barely moved from the corner where she had curled up like a wounded animal. Yasper gave her his bed while he slept in a chair, waking every few hours to check that she was still breathing, still there. He brought her food and water, but she only picked at the meals, her eyes distant and haunted. On the fourth morning, he found her standing at the window, looking out over the fortress walls toward the northern mountains. The mountains where her clan lived. Where her clan's sisters had come from before he had watched them die. "They were your family," he said quietly. It was not a question. She nodded without turning. "My mother was among them, the tall one with the scar across her face." Yasper closed his eyes. He had noticed that one, noticed her defiant stare as the noose tightened. "I am sorry." "Are you?" Now she turned, and there was bitterness in her voice. "You are the one who executed them. I did not give the order, I did not tie the knots, but you serve the ones who did." She crossed her arms, her expression hard. "You wear their colors, you follow their commands, until you do not when it suits you." "I saved your life," Yasper said, and heard the defensive edge in his own voice. "Why?" she demanded again. "Why me and not them? What makes my life worth more than my mother's, my clan sisters?" He had no answer. He had asked himself the same question 100 times in the last 3 days. "You did not kill anyone," he said finally. "That has to mean something. It meant nothing to your general. It would have meant nothing to the executioner." She stepped closer, her tusks catching the morning light. "It only meant something to you. So I ask again, human? Why?" Yasper met her gaze and spoke the truth he barely understood himself. "Because when I saw you standing there, terrified and alone, I could not let you die. Something in me refused. That is all I know." Some of the hardness left her face. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "My mother used to say that some humans still had honor. I did not believe her. I thought you were all just killers and thieves taking what you wanted from Orc lands." "Many of us are," Yasper said quietly. "I have been at times, I have fought your people, I have burned your villages. Why tell me this? Because you deserve the truth. If you are going to stay here, under my protection, you should know who you are staying with." Kraska was quiet for a long time. Then she moved to the table and sat down, her movements stiff with injury and grief. "What happens now?" she asked. "Your general said I am your responsibility." "What does that mean?" Yasper sat across from her. "It means you stay with me. You do not leave the fortress grounds without my permission. You commit no crimes. In exchange, you have food, shelter, and safety." "So I am a prisoner." "You are a guest," he corrected. "A guest who cannot leave. But you will be treated with respect. I give you my word on that." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "The word of a human soldier. What is that worth?" "We are about to find out," Yasper said. Over the following weeks, they built something fragile between them. Not trust, not yet, but a tentative truce. Yasper continued his duties at the fortress, now under the cold eye of his fellow officers. He was not stripped of rank as he had feared, but he was passed over for assignments, excluded from planning meetings, given the grunt work usually reserved for junior soldiers. His friends stopped visiting. His name was whispered with mockery in the barracks. He bore it all without complaint, because the alternative was turning Kraska over to a different authority, and he knew what would happen to her then. She, in turn, began to emerge from her shell of grief. She cleaned his quarters without being asked, mended his torn clothes with surprising skill, and cooked meals using the rations he brought home. The food was strange, spiced with herbs he did not recognize, but it was good. Better than anything he had tasted in the fortress mess. They began to talk. Carefully at first, circling around each other like wary animals. Yasper told her about growing up in a farming village, about joining the army to escape poverty, about the battles that had earned him his rank. Kraska told him about the mountain clans, about hunting in the high forests, about the songs her mother had sung around the fire. "We did not want to raid your caravan," she said one evening as they sat by the hearth. "We were starving. The snows came early last year and the hunting was poor. The elders said we needed supplies to survive the winter. So you came down into human lands. Yes, my mother tried to negotiate. She went to one of your border settlements and offered to trade, to work. They drove her away with arrows. Kraska's hands clenched in her lap. So we took what we needed to live, and your soldiers came, and there was fighting, and people died. On both sides, Yasper said quietly. On both sides, she agreed. Does that make it right? No, but it makes it understandable. He stared into the flames. We have been at war with your people for so long, I do not think anyone remembers how it started. Just that we hate you and you hate us, and the blood keeps flowing. Do you hate me? Kraska asked suddenly. Yasper looked at her, really looked at her. She had cleaned up over the past weeks, washed away the grime and blood. Her black hair was braided now, revealing the strong lines of her face, the curve of her tusks, the intelligence in her amber eyes. She wore one of his old shirts, too large on her frame, and somehow that made her look both vulnerable and fierce. No, he said. I do not hate you. Why not? I am an orc. You are supposed to hate me, I know. He turned back to the fire. I am failing at a lot of things I am supposed to do lately. She was quiet, and then he heard a sound he had never expected. She laughed. It was soft, almost rusty, as if the muscles had forgotten how. But it was real. What is funny? He asked. You, she said. Me. This whole impossible situation. She shook her head. We should not be sitting here like this, human and orc sharing a fire. It goes against everything both our people believe. Maybe both our people are wrong. Maybe. She met his eyes across the flames, and something passed between them. Something fragile and new and terrifying. Your name, you said it that day, but I was too frightened to hear it properly. Yasper, he said. Yasper Xander. Yasper, she repeated, tasting the syllables. It is a good name for a good man. I am not sure I am good. You stood in front of an executioner for me, Kraska said softly. You threw away your career, your reputation, your safety, for an orc you had never met. If that is not good, then I do not know what is. Yasper had no answer for that. He only knew that when he looked at her, his chest felt tight, his heart beat faster, and he was terrified of what that might mean. Spring came slowly to the northern territories, but it came. The snow melted, revealing green beneath. The fortress walls dripped with runoff, and the courtyards turned to mud. Yasper's duties remained menial, but he found he did not mind as much as he should. His evenings with Kraska had become the center of his day, the hours he looked forward to as he slogged through patrol rotations and equipment inspections. She had started venturing out of his quarters, at first just to the small walled garden behind the officers' barracks, then to the fortress kitchens where she traded recipes with the cooks. Not everyone accepted her. Some soldiers went out of their way to spit at her feet or shoulder past her in corridors. But a few, a surprising few, nodded politely or even smiled. Yasper watched her grow stronger, more confident, and felt something blossom in his chest that he dared not name. It was on a warm afternoon in late spring that everything changed. Yasper had been called to the armory to inventory supplies, tedious work that took hours. He returned to his quarters as the sun was setting, tired and dusty, and found Kraska sitting on the floor surrounded by papers. "What is all this?" he asked. She looked up, her face flushed with excitement. "Maps, reports. I borrowed them from the fortress library." At his alarmed expression, she added quickly, "I told them they were for you. I did not lie. Kraska, what are you doing?" "Trying to stop a war," she said simply. He knelt beside her, studying the papers. They were border reports, accounts of skirmishes, settlements attacked, trade caravans raided. The eternal cycle of violence between humans and orcs, documented in dry military language. "Look," she said, pointing to a map. Every raid follows the same pattern. They happen in winter or early spring when food is scarce. The orc clans that raid are always from the high mountains where the hunting is worst. And look at this. She pulled out another report. After every raid, your people send soldiers to burn orc villages, which makes the survivors desperate. So they raid again the next winter, and on and on. Yasper studied the pattern she had traced. She was right. He could see it now, the brutal logic of desperation and retaliation feeding each other year after year. "What are you suggesting?" he asked. "Trade," Kraska said. "Real trade, not just token gestures. Let the mountain clans exchange furs and herbs for grain and supplies. Station trading posts at the border, protected by both human and orc guards. Give both sides a reason not to fight." The generals would never agree to it, neither would the orc chieftains. Not if they were asked by a human, she agreed. But what if they were asked by a human and an orc together? Someone from each side who understands both. Yasper stared at her. "You want us to propose this, to both our peoples? Why not? You saved my life, Yasper. You showed me that humans could be more than killers. Let me show you that orcs can be more than monsters." Her eyes blazed with passion, with purpose. "Let us try to build something better." It was insane. It would never work. They would be laughed at, dismissed, possibly imprisoned for treason. But as Yasper looked at her face, at the hope and determination there, he found himself nodding. "All right," he said. "Let us try." They spent weeks preparing. Kraska wrote letters to the orc chieftains in her own language, proposing the trade arrangement. Yasper drafted a formal proposal to General Thorn and the Fortress Council. They gathered evidence, compiled statistics, built arguments, and slowly, impossibly, people began to listen. Not everyone, not even most, but a few of the older officers who were tired of endless war. A handful of merchants who saw profit in trading with orcs. Some farmers on the border who just wanted to live in peace. General Thorn remained skeptical, but he agreed to let Yasper present the proposal to the regional governor. The governor, to Yasper's shock, approved a trial program. 3 trading posts would be established, staffed by volunteers from both sides. It was a small victory, a tiny crack in decades of hatred. But it was something. The night they received the governor's approval, Yasper and Kraska celebrated with a bottle of wine he had been saving. They sat in the garden behind the barracks, under a sky full of stars, and drank and laughed and talked about the future. "I cannot believe it is actually happening," Kraska said, her face flushed from wine and joy. "When I woke up that morning, waiting to be executed, I never imagined any of this." "Neither did I," Yasper admitted. "I thought I knew exactly how my life would go. Serve in the army, maybe make captain if I was lucky, retire on a small pension. It was all mapped out. And now I have no idea what comes next." He looked at her, this orc woman who had somehow become the center of his world. "But I think I like it better this way." She smiled, her tusks glinting in the starlight. "You are a strange man, Yasper Xander, but I am glad I met you. Even though I am human, especially because you are human." She set down her wine cup and moved closer until their shoulders were nearly touching. "You showed me that people can change, that maybe there is hope for all of us." Yasper's heart was hammering. He could feel the warmth of her beside him, smell the herbs she used in her hair. They were so close, closer than they had ever been. All he had to do was turn his head, reach out. "Kraska," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." "What?" "I think I am falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and true. She did not move, did not speak. For a terrible moment, Yasper thought he had ruined everything. Then her hand found his in the darkness, her fingers lacing through his. Her skin was rough with calluses, her grip strong. "I know," she whispered. "I have been falling in love with you too." I tried to fight it, told myself it was impossible, that you were human and I was orc and it could never work. But every day, I fall a little more. Yasper turned to face her, and she turned too, and they were so close now he could see flecks of gold in her amber eyes. "This is not going to be easy," he said. "Both our peoples will hate this, will hate us. I know. They will say terrible things, call us traitors, try to keep us apart." "I know," she said again. "But Yasper, you stood in front of an executioner for me. You gave up everything for me. How can I not love you after that?" He cupped her face in his hands, feeling the warmth of her skin, the slight roughness where her tusks emerged. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. "I do not know how this ends," he said, "but I want to find out. With you. With me," she agreed. And then he kissed her. It was awkward at first, their faces different shapes, her tusks requiring careful navigation. But they learned, adjusted, found what worked. And when they figured it out, it was like nothing Yasper had ever experienced. She tasted of wine and spices and something uniquely her, and he never wanted to stop. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kraska laughed softly. "Well," she said, "I suppose we are really doing this. I suppose we are." They stayed in the garden until late, holding each other under the stars, talking and kissing and dreaming of impossible futures. And for the first time since that morning in the execution yard, Yasper felt like he had made exactly the right choice. Summer came in full force, bringing with it the reality of their new relationship. They tried to be discreet at first, but news spread quickly through the fortress. Commander Xander and the orc woman. The whispers turned to open gossip, then to accusations. Yasper was called before General Thorn. "This has to stop," the general said without preamble. "Your personal involvement with the orc is undermining the entire trading post initiative. The other officers think you are compromised. Some are calling for your dismissal." Yasper stood at attention, his face carefully neutral. "With respect, sir, my personal life does not affect my duties." "Everything affects your duties, Commander. You are a symbol now, whether you like it or not. You saved that orc's life in front of the entire fortress. Now you are betting her. What message does that send?" "That orcs are people, sir. That they deserve the same dignity and respect as humans." Thorn's expression darkened. "That is not your decision to make. It is when it concerns my own heart, sir." They stared at each other across the desk. Finally, Thorn sighed. "I warned you that she was your responsibility. That still stands. But Xander, you need to understand what you are doing. This thing between you and her, it is not just about love. It is political. It will be used as a weapon by those who oppose the trade agreements. Then they are fools, sir. If they cannot see past their prejudice, that is their failing, not mine." Brave words. But words do not stop assassins. There are people in this fortress who would kill you both for what you represent. Yasper felt ice in his veins. "Is that a threat, sir?" "It is a warning," Thorn said heavily. "I did not spend 30 years keeping this fortress safe to watch one of my best officers murdered in his sleep. Be careful, Xander, and for the love of the gods, be smart." Yasper took the warning seriously. He moved Kraska to more secure quarters, posted guards he trusted, and started varying his routines. But he refused to hide their relationship. If anything, he became more open about it, walking with her through the fortress grounds, eating meals with her in the officers' mess, making it clear to everyone that she was under his protection and held his affection. Most people still avoided them. But slowly, grudgingly, a few began to accept it. A young lieutenant who had lost his brother to orc raiders approached Yasper one day in the training yard. "I want to hate you for what you are doing," the lieutenant said. "But I saw you drill the new recruits yesterday. You are still the best soldier in this fortress. That has not changed. No, Yasper agreed. It has not. And the orc woman, Kraska. I saw her in the market last week. A child had fallen in the well and she did not hesitate, just jumped in and pulled him out, saved his life. Yasper smiled. He had not heard about that. She is a good person. Yeah, the lieutenant shifted uncomfortably. Look, I am not saying I understand this, but I am not going to spit on you either. That is all. It was not much, but it was something. The first trading post opened in midsummer, in a meadow halfway between the fortress and the nearest orc settlement. It was a simple structure, just a wooden building with a wide porch and a flagpole flying both human and orc banners. Yasper and Kraska were there for the opening, along with General Thorn, 3 orc chieftains and a crowd of nervous merchants from both sides. The first day was tense. Humans and orcs circled each other warily, hands never far from weapons. But gradually, cautiously, they began to trade. Orc furs for human grain, herbal medicines for iron tools. Words were exchanged, then nods, then even a few smiles. By the end of the day, the trading post had processed more exchanges than anyone had predicted. It was not peace, not yet, but it was a beginning. Kraska stood beside Yasper as they watched the sun set over the meadow, painting the sky gold and red. We did this, she said quietly. You and me, we actually did this. You did this, Yasper corrected. It was your idea, your maps and plans. But you gave me the chance to try. You believed in me when no one else would. She leaned against him and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. I wish my mother could see this. She would have loved it. I think she would be proud of you. I hope so. Kraska was quiet for a moment, then said, Yasper, I need to tell you something. I have been thinking about it for weeks. What is it? I want to go back to the mountains, to my clan. Yasper felt his stomach drop. You want to leave, not leave you, she said quickly. Never that. But I need to face them, to tell them what happened, what we are trying to build here. And I need to know if I still have a home there or if I am truly alone now. He understood, even as fear gripped his heart. When do you want to go? Soon, before the summer ends. She turned to face him. And I want you to come with me. Kraska, I am a human soldier. Your people will kill me on sight. Not if I am with you, not if I speak for you. Her eyes were fierce. I am not ashamed of what we have. I will not hide it from my people. If they cannot accept you, then they cannot accept me either. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but Yasper found himself nodding. All right, we will go together. They left on a morning in late summer, just the two of them, with enough supplies for a week's journey into the mountains. General Thorn had not been happy about it, but he had learned that arguing with Yasper was pointless once his mind was made up. The mountain paths were steep and treacherous, winding through forests of ancient pine and over boulder-strewn slopes. Kraska led the way with the confidence of someone who had walked these trails her entire life. Yasper followed, his soldiers' training keeping him alert for danger. On the third day they were surrounded. Orcs melted out of the trees, 24 warriors with axes and bows. They formed a circle around Yasper and Kraska, their faces hard with suspicion and anger. One of them, a massive male with scars covering his arms, stepped forward. Kraska, he said in the Orcish tongue. Yasper had learned enough from her to understand basic words. You live. We thought you dead. I live, Gormath, she replied, because of this human. All eyes turned to Yasper. He kept his hands away from his weapons, his posture non-threatening, but he met their stares without flinching. Why would a human save an orc? Gormath demanded. Because he is a good man, Kraska said simply. Because he saw me as a person, not a monster. His name is Yasper Xander, and he is my chosen mate. Shocked silence. Then angry muttering rising in volume. Several orcs reached for their weapons. You betray your people, one shouted. I betray no one, Kraska said, her voice rising to carry over the crowd. I seek peace. I seek a way for our peoples to live without endless war, and this man helped me build it. By spreading your legs for a human. Another orc spat. Kraska's expression turned to stone. I love him. And he loves me. If that offends you, then kill us both now. But know that if you do, you destroy the only chance our clans have for a better future. Gormath studied them both for a long moment. Then he gestured, and the circle of warriors relaxed slightly. Come, he said. The elders will decide your fate. They were escorted deeper into the mountains, to a settlement nestled in a high valley. It was larger than Yasper had expected, with dozens of stone and timber structures clustered around a central longhouse. Orc children stopped playing to stare as they passed. Elders emerged from doorways, their expressions grim. Kraska and Yasper were brought before a council of 3 elders, ancient orcs whose faces were maps of wrinkles and scars. The eldest, a female with white hair and tusks worn smooth with age, spoke first. Kraska, daughter of Shakra who died. Speak your truth. Kraska told them everything. The raid, the capture, the execution of her clan sisters. Yasper stepping forward to save her. The months they had spent together, the trading posts they had established, the fragile peace they were building. The elders listened in silence. When she finished, the white-haired one turned to Yasper. Human, she said in accented but clear human tongue. Why did you save her? Yasper had prepared for this question, rehearsed answers in his head. But now, facing this council with his life and Kraska's in the balance, he spoke only the simple truth. Because it was the right thing to do, because she deserved to live, and because the moment I saw her, I knew my life would never be complete without her. The elder's eyes narrowed. Pretty words. True words, Yasper said. I know you have no reason to trust me. I am a soldier. I have fought your people. But I am trying to build something better. Kraska and I both are, not for glory or profit, but because we are tired of the killing. The 3 elders conferred in low voices. Finally, the white-haired one nodded. You may stay, she said. For 3 days we will watch you, see if your actions match your words. If they do not, you will die. Both of you. It was not the welcome Yasper had hoped for, but it was better than immediate execution. He and Kraska were given a small hut at the edge of the settlement and left under guard. That first night, lying together on a pile of furs, Kraska whispered, I am sorry. I thought they would be more understanding. They are afraid, Yasper said. They have lost people to humans just as humans have lost people to orcs. Trust takes time. Do we have time? We will make time. Over the next 3 days, Yasper did everything he could to prove himself. He helped repair buildings damaged by winter storms. He shared his knowledge of metalworking, showing the orc smiths techniques they had not seen before. He played with the children, who were less afraid of him than the adults, and told them stories of the world beyond the mountains. And everywhere he went, he treated the orcs with respect. He learned their names, their customs, their history. He ate their food without complaint, even the spicy stews that made his eyes water. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, he chose his words carefully. Kraska watched him with something like wonder in her eyes. On the 3rd night, they were summoned back to the elders' council. The white-haired one regarded them both for a long moment, then smiled. It was the first smile Yasper had seen on any orc face in this settlement. You have done well, human, she said. You show respect, show humility. You do not act as a conqueror but as a guest. I am honored to be here, Yasper said honestly. And you, Kraska, you have chosen well. Your mother would be proud. Kraska's breath caught. You knew my mother. I knew Shakra since she was a child. She was fierce and brave, and she died trying to feed her people. That is no shame. The elder leaned forward. You carry her spirit, And if this human makes you happy, if he helps you build peace, then you have our blessing." Tears streamed down Kraska's face. She had not cried since that first week after her rescue, but now she wept openly, and Yasper pulled her close. "Thank you," he said to the elders. "We will not fail you." "See that you do not," the elder said. "Now go, rest. In the morning we will discuss the trading agreements." They left the mountains a week later, with signed agreements from 3 different orc clans and a promise of cooperation. The journey back to the fortress felt like a victory march, even though it was just the 2 of them on a mountain path. "We really did it," Kraska said, laughing and breathless. "They agreed, they actually agreed." "You did it," Yasper corrected. "You faced your people and made them see reason." "We did it together," she insisted. "Everything we have done together, and everything we will do the same way." "Together," Yasper agreed. "Always." They reached the fortress as autumn was painting the leaves gold and red. General Thorn met them at the gate, his expression unreadable. But when they presented the signed agreements, his face broke into a rare smile. "Well done, Xander," he said. "Truly well done. This changes everything." And it did. Over the following months, more trading posts opened. More agreements were signed. Border skirmishes decreased, then stopped altogether. Humans and orcs who had been enemies for generations began to see each other as potential partners, even friends. It was not perfect. There were setbacks, conflicts, moments when the fragile peace seemed ready to shatter. But Yasper and Kraska were always there, mediating, negotiating, building bridges between their peoples. And through it all, their love grew stronger. They moved into a small house just outside the fortress, a place that was neither purely human nor purely orc, but something new, something their own. They hosted dinners where human officers sat beside orc chieftains, where old enemies shared food and stories and laughter. People began to point to them as proof that change was possible, that the old hatreds did not have to define the future. They became symbols, representatives, the face of a new era. It was exhausting and terrifying and more wonderful than anything Yasper had ever imagined. Winter came again, the first since that terrible morning in the execution yard. Yasper woke one snowy morning to find Kraska already up, standing by the window and watching the snow fall. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "That day," she said quietly, "when you stood in front of me and said not her, I think about it all the time. How different my life would be if you had not done that, how I would not be here at all. I think about it too. Do you regret it? Everything it cost you?" Yasper turned her to face him, cupping her face in his hands. "Never. Not for one single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Kraska. Everything I gave up was worth it to have you in my life." She kissed him, deep and fierce and full of love. When they broke apart, she was smiling through tears. "Yasper Xander," she said. "Will you marry me?" He blinked, surprised. "You are asking me. Among my people, the woman proposes. If you do not want to, I understand, but I want to be your wife. I want to bind my life to yours in every way our peoples recognize." "Yes," he said immediately. "Yes, of course, yes. I was trying to figure out how to ask you for weeks." She laughed, bright and joyful. "Then we will have 2 ceremonies, one in your tradition, one in mine. We will be married twice by both our peoples." "That sounds perfect." They held both ceremonies in the spring, on the anniversary of the day Yasper had saved her life. The human ceremony was held in the fortress chapel, with General Thorn as witness and a few of Yasper's remaining friends in attendance. Kraska wore a dress of green silk that matched her skin and made her look like something out of a dream. The orc ceremony was held in the mountains, under the open sky, with the entire settlement as witness. Yasper wore traditional orc leathers and learned the vows in Orcish, stumbling over the guttural sounds. When he finally got them right, the assembled orcs cheered so loud it echoed off the peaks. That night, lying together as husband and wife in the hut the settlement had built for them, Kraska traced the lines of Yasper's face with one finger. "I love you," she said. "I loved you the moment you stepped in front of that executioner. I loved you through all my fear and grief. I loved you as we built peace together, and I will love you until the day I die." "I loved you before I even knew you," Yasper said. "Some part of me recognized you that day, recognized that you were meant to be mine and I was meant to be yours. Everything I am, everything I have is yours. Forever." They made love slowly, tenderly, celebrating their union with their bodies as they had with their words. And later, as Kraska slept in his arms, Yasper looked out the window at the stars and thought about how one moment, one choice, had changed the course of his entire life. He had been a soldier following orders, going through the motions, never questioning the hatred he had been taught. And then he had seen a young orc woman trembling in chains, and something fundamental had shifted inside him. He had stepped forward when every instinct told him to stay back. He had said not her when silence would have been easier. He had thrown away everything he knew for a person he did not even know, and it had been the best decision of his life. The years that followed were not easy. There were still people on both sides who opposed the peace, who saw Yasper and Kraska as traitors. There were assassination attempts, angry protests, political battles that exhausted them both, but there were also victories. New settlements where humans and orcs lived side by side. Children growing up who had never known war. Young couples following their example, crossing the divide to find love in unexpected places. 5 years after that day in the execution yard, Kraska gave birth to their first child. A daughter with green skin and her mother's amber eyes, but with Yasper's nose and mouth. They named her Chakra after Kraska's mother and held her up to the sky as both their peoples cheered. She was the first, but not the last. Over the years, more children were born of human-orc unions. A new generation that belonged to both peoples and neither, that carried the best of both worlds in their blood. Yasper watched his daughter grow, watched her learn to speak both tongues, to walk in both worlds. He taught her to read and write, to fight with a sword. Kraska taught her to hunt and track, to honor the old orc ways. Together, they taught her that love was stronger than hate, that peace was worth fighting for, and that one person could change the world. On their 10th anniversary, Yasper and Kraska stood together on the hill overlooking the first trading post. It had grown into a small town now, with permanent residents from both species. The flags still flew, human and orcs side by side, but now they seemed less like a fragile truce and more like a promise kept. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you had not stepped forward that day?" Kraska asked. "All the time," Yasper admitted. "I think about those other 6 orcs who died. I think about how I could not save them. That haunts me still. But you saved me, and through saving me, you saved so many others." She took his hand. "We cannot undo the past. We cannot bring back those who were lost. But we can honor them by building something better. Is that what we have done? Built something better? Look around, Yasper." She gestured to the town below where humans and orcs walked together, worked together, lived together. "What do you think?" He looked. He saw orc children playing with human children. He saw merchants of both species haggling good-naturedly over prices. He saw an orc man helping a human woman repair her roof. He saw a human soldier laughing at a joke told by an orc warrior. He saw peace. Imperfect, fragile, still threatened by old hatreds and new fears, but real, growing stronger every day. "Yes," he said finally. Yes, I think we have built something better. Good. Kraska leaned against him and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Because we are not done yet. There is still so much work to do, I know, but we will do it together. Together, she agreed. Always together. They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. Two people who should have been enemies, who had become lovers, who had changed the world through the simple act of choosing love over hate. Below them, in the town they had helped build, lights began to kindle in windows. Human lights and orc lights, all glowing warm against the gathering dark. It was beautiful, Yasper thought. It was worth everything. He thought back to that morning in the execution yard, to the moment he had seen Kraska and known he could not let her die. He had not understood why at the time. Had not known that she would become his wife, his partner, the mother of his children. Had not known that saving her would set in motion a chain of events that would reshape the relationship between their peoples. He had only known that it was right, and in the end, that had been enough. Years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow. General Thorn died peacefully in his sleep, but not before telling Yasper that saving Kraska had been the bravest thing he had ever seen a soldier do. The old orc elder who had blessed their marriage also passed, but she lived long enough to hold Chakra and tell her she carried the hope of two peoples in her small hands. Yasper retired from military service and became a full-time ambassador, traveling between human and orc settlements to mediate disputes and strengthen alliances. Kraska worked beside him, using her knowledge of both cultures to bridge gaps he could not cross alone. They were partners in every sense, complementing each other's strengths, supporting each other's weaknesses. Their daughter Chakra grew into a remarkable young woman, fierce and compassionate like her mother, thoughtful and principled like her father. She followed in their footsteps, training as both a warrior and a diplomat. By the time she was 20, she had negotiated 3 major peace treaties and prevented 2 border wars. "You raised her well," Yasper told Kraska one evening as they watched their daughter address a council of human and orc leaders. "We raised her well," Kraska corrected. "She is ours, the best of both of us." Other children followed Chakra, each one a testament to the love between Yasper and Kraska, each one proof that the divide between their peoples could be crossed. The family became a symbol, yes, but more importantly, they became a reality. They were not perfect, not idealized, but real people living real lives, facing real challenges. And through it all, the love between Yasper and Kraska never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared experience and weathered by shared hardship. They had inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else. They had quiet moments sitting together in comfortable silence. They had passionate arguments that ended in passionate reconciliations. They had a life, a real life, the kind neither had imagined possible that day in the execution yard. On their 20th anniversary, the governor of the Northern Territories threw them a celebration. Representatives came from across the region, human and orc alike, to honor the couple who had started it all. Speeches were made, toasts were raised, and Yasper found himself standing before a crowd of hundreds, trying to find words adequate to the moment. 20 years ago, he said, his voice carrying across the hall, I was a soldier who followed orders. I believed what I had been taught, hated who I had been told to hate. And then one morning, I saw a young orc woman standing in chains, and everything changed. He looked at Kraska, standing beside him in a gown that combined human and orc fashion into something entirely new. She smiled at him, her tusks catching the light, her amber eyes full of love. I am often asked why I stepped forward that day, Yasper continued. Why I risked everything for a stranger, And the truth is, I still do not fully know. I only knew that letting her die would break something essential inside me, that I had to try, even if I failed, even if it cost me everything. He took Kraska's hand. What I did not know, could not have known, was that saving her would save me too. That she would teach me what real courage looked like, what real love meant. That together, we would build something neither of us could have built alone. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. Yasper saw humans and orcs standing together, saw the children of both species playing together in the corners of the hall, saw the future they had fought so hard to create. So on this, our 20th anniversary, I want to say thank you, he said. Thank you to everyone who believed in us when no one else did. Thank you to those who took a chance on peace when war was all they had known. And thank you to my wife, my partner, my love. Thank you for being brave enough to love me back. Kraska pulled him into a kiss and the crowd erupted in cheers. When they finally broke apart, she took the podium. 20 years ago, she said, her voice thick with emotion, I stood in an execution yard waiting to die. I had given up hope. I thought my life was over. And then a human soldier I had never met stepped in front of me and said 2 words, not her. She had to pause, blinking back tears. Yasper squeezed her hand. Those 2 words changed everything, she continued. They gave me a second chance at life. They showed me that humans could be more than enemies. They gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward for all of us. She looked out at the crowd, at the mix of faces, the blend of cultures. We are not here to celebrate me and Yasper. We are here to celebrate what we have all built together. Every human who reached out to an orc neighbor. Every orc who chose trust over suspicion. Every child born who will never know the old hatreds. That is what we celebrate tonight. More cheers. Someone started a chant, and soon the whole hall was echoing with it. Peace, peace, peace. Later, when the celebration had wound down and most of the guests had left, Yasper and Kraska slipped away to a balcony overlooking the town. The night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. Can you believe it has been 20 years? Kraska asked, leaning against the railing. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Yasper stood beside her, looking out at the lights below. Do you ever regret it? Choosing me, choosing this life? Never, she said immediately. Not once. Not even on the hardest days when it felt like the whole world was against us. Because I had you and you had me, and that was always enough. I regret that I could not save the others, Yasper said quietly. Your mother, your clan sisters, I think about them all the time. I know, I do too. Kraska took his hand. But Yasper, you could not have saved them all. The general would never have allowed it. What you did, standing up for even one of us, was miraculous. It was the crack that let the light in. Your mother would have been proud of you, of what you have become. I hope so. I like to think she is watching wherever she is. That she sees what we have built and knows her death was not in vain. Kraska turned to face him. You gave me a life, Yasper. A real life, full of love and purpose and meaning. How can I ever regret that? He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. She smelled like the herbs she used, like home, like everything good in his life. I love you, he said. I have loved you every day for 20 years, and I will love you every day for the rest of my life. And I love you, she replied. My hero, my husband, my heart. They stayed on that balcony for a long time, holding each other under the stars. 2 people who had changed the world simply by choosing to see each other as human, as real, as worthy of love. The decades rolled on. Yasper's hair went gray, then white. Lines appeared around Kraska's eyes, though her skin stayed green and vibrant. They slowed down, eventually retiring from active diplomacy to become advisors and teachers. They wrote books about their experiences, taught classes on interspecies relations, and mentored the next generation of peacekeepers. Their children grew and had children of their own. Chakra married an orc warrior and gave them 3 grandchildren. Their second daughter married a human farmer and gave them 2 more. Their son, youngest of the 3, chose not to marry at all, dedicating his life to medicine and becoming the region's most respected healer. The peace held. Not perfectly, not without setbacks and challenges, but it held. The trading posts became permanent towns. The towns became cities. New traditions emerged, blending human and orc culture into something unique and beautiful. And through it all, Yasper and Krasger remained the foundation, the example, the proof that it could work. When Yasper was 70 years old, he fell ill. It was a sickness of the lungs, common among elderly soldiers who had spent too many winters campaigning in cold climates. The healers did what they could, but they were honest about his chances. Krasger never left his side. She sat by his bed day and night, holding his hand, telling him stories, reminding him of all they had shared. Their children came to visit and their grandchildren, and the room was always full of love. On a quiet morning in early spring, as birds sang outside the window, Yasper opened his eyes and looked at his wife. She was still beautiful to him, her green skin weathered but radiant, her amber eyes full of the same spirit that had first captured his heart. "Krasger," he said, his voice weak but clear, "I need you to know something." "Anything," she said, tears streaming down her face. "That day in the execution yard when I stepped forward, I told myself I was doing it because it was right, because you deserved to live, and that was true." He coughed and she helped him drink some water. "But there was more to it than that. Even then, even in that first moment, some part of me recognized you, knew you were special, knew you were mine." "Yasper, let me finish," he said gently. "I have had 70 years on this earth. I have been a soldier, a diplomat, a husband, a father. I have seen war and peace, hatred and love, and the best moment of my entire life was when I stood in front of you and said not her. Because that moment gave me everything that came after. It gave me you." "You gave me everything too," Krasger said, sobbing now. "You gave me a life when I had none. You gave me love when I did not know I deserved it. You gave me a family, a purpose, a world worth living in." "Then we gave each other everything," Yasper said, "and that is more than most people ever get." "I am grateful, Krasger, for every single day, for every moment, for you. I am not ready to lose you," she whispered, "I know. But you are strong. The strongest person I have ever known. You will be all right. You will keep building, keep teaching, keep showing people that love is possible." He squeezed her hand with what little strength he had left. "And when it is your time, I will be waiting. We will find each other again, just like we found each other that day. Promise, I promise. In this life and the next, you are mine and I am yours, forever." She leaned down and kissed him, soft and gentle and full of 50 years of love. When she pulled back, he was smiling. "Not her," he whispered. "Never her, always her." And then he closed his eyes and let go, knowing he had lived a life full of meaning, full of love, full of everything that mattered. Krasger sat with him for a long time, holding his hand even after it grew cold, saying goodbye to the man who had saved her life and given her the world. She cried until she had no tears left, and then she cried some more, but eventually she stood. Because he was right, she was strong. And there was still work to do, still a legacy to carry forward. Yasper's funeral was the largest gathering the region had ever seen. Thousands came to pay their respects, human and orc alike. They told stories of his bravery, his kindness, his unwavering commitment to peace. They spoke of the day he had stood alone in an execution yard and changed history. Krasger spoke last. She stood before the assembled crowd, her voice strong despite her grief. "My husband once asked me if I ever regretted our life together," she said. "I told him never, and I meant it. Yasper Xander was the best man I ever knew. He was brave and kind and foolish enough to believe that one person could make a difference." She looked out at all the faces, at the world they had built together. And he was right. One person can make a difference. One choice, one moment, one stand for what is right. That is all it takes to change the world. So I ask you all to remember him, remember what he did and why he did it, and then go out and do the same. Stand up for what is right, even when it is hard. Love boldly, even when it is forbidden. Build bridges instead of walls. That is how we honor his memory. That is how we continue his work. The crowd stood and applauded, and the sound rolled like thunder across the valley. Kraska lived another 10 years after Yasper's death. She spent them teaching, writing, and watching their grandchildren grow. She saw the peace they had built solidify into something permanent, something that would last for generations. She saw human-orc marriages become common, unremarkable, just another part of life. And when her own time came, she went peacefully, surrounded by family with a smile on her face. Her last words were, "I am coming, Yasper. Wait for me." They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the first trading post, under a monument that bore a simple inscription. They chose love over hatred, peace over war, and each other over everything. May their example light the way for all who come after. And it did. For generations to come, children learned the story of Yasper and Kraska, of the human soldier who stood in front of an executioner and said not her, of the orc woman who loved him for it, of the impossible romance that changed the world. The story became legend, and the legend became truth. It was told around fires, taught in schools, passed down from parent to child. Some details changed over time, embellished or simplified, but the heart of it remained the same. One person can make a difference. One choice can change everything. Love is stronger than hate, and in a world that had known too much war, too much loss, that message was everything. The trading post grew into a city. The city became a capital. Human and orc leaders governed together, their partnership rooted in the example Yasper and Kraska had set. Peace became not just a hope but an expectation, not just a dream but a reality. And on the hill where they were buried, people still came to pay their respects, to lay flowers on the grave of the couple who had proven that love could conquer hatred, that courage could change the world, that one person standing alone could start a revolution. Not her, the monument read. And below it, in smaller letters added by their children, but always her. Forever her. Eternally her. The story did not end with their deaths. It continued in every human-orc couple who found love across the divide. In every child born with green skin and human features, or pale skin and small tusks. In every treaty signed, every friendship forged, every moment of understanding between peoples who had once been enemies. Yasper and Kraska's legacy lived on in the very fabric of the world they had helped create. A world where orcs were not monsters and humans were not oppressors, but where both were simply people, trying to live and love and build something better. It was not perfect. There were still prejudices, still conflicts, still people on both sides who clung to the old hatreds. But they were outnumbered now by those who believed in the possibility of peace, who had seen with their own eyes that it could work. And when those believers needed courage, when they needed a reminder of why they kept fighting for understanding instead of succumbing to fear, they thought of a morning in an execution yard, of 7 orcs lined up to die, of one human soldier who stepped forward and said 2 simple words, "Not her." Those words echoed across the decades, across the generations. They became a rallying cry for anyone who stood against injustice, who defended the innocent, who chose compassion over cruelty, not her, not him, not them, not today, not ever. And every time someone made that choice, every time someone stood up for what was right even when it was hard, Yasper and Kraska's legacy grew stronger. Their story became immortal, not because they were perfect, but because they were real. They had been flawed people who made mistakes, who struggled and doubted and sometimes failed. But they had loved each other fiercely, and that love had transformed not just their own lives but the lives of everyone around them. That was the true miracle. Not that a human had saved an orc, but that in saving her, he had saved them both. In choosing her, he had chosen a better future for everyone. In loving her, he had shown that love was possible even in the darkest times, even across the deepest divides. And she had loved him back with equal intensity, equal courage, equal commitment. She had been his partner in every sense, his equal in building the peace they both dreamed of. She had been brave enough to face her own people, to defend her choice, to stand beside him even when it would have been easier to walk away. Together, they had been unstoppable. Together, they had changed the world, and in the end, that was all anyone could hope for, to live a life of meaning. To love without reservation, to leave the world a little better than they found it. Yasper and Kraska had done all of that and more. They had lived and loved and built something beautiful out of ashes and hatred and fear. They had proven that peace was possible, that understanding could be achieved, that people could change. And their story, the story of the day he said not her, would be told for as long as there were people to tell it. A reminder that even in the darkest moments, even when all hope seems lost, one person can make a difference. One choice can change everything. One word spoken with conviction can echo through eternity, not her. And in saying those two words, Yasper Xander had saved more than one life. He had saved the future itself.